What happens when you give control of 40,000 professional soldiers to a man who is, to put it politely, a glory-obsessed lunatic? It is late December, 218 BC. The Po Valley is not a nice place. It is sleeting, it is snowing, and it is miserably cold. Hannibal Barca, fresh off his impossible stroll over the Alps, is camped here, and his army of frostbitten, one-eyed, and deeply unpleasant veterans is busy terrifying the locals. The Roman Republic, naturally, is having a complete meltdown. They had sent 2 consuls to stop this. First, there was Publius Cornelius Scipio. He'd already fought Hannibal at the Battle of Ticinus a few weeks earlier. Fought is a strong word. It was more of a, my cavalry got mulched and I was personally stabbed, having to be saved by my teenage son. Because Scipio was busy inventing new ways to bleed, the Senate panicked and called up the other consul, Tiberius Sempronius Longus. Longus. Oh, Longus. If Scipio was caution, Longus was pure, unfiltered, hold-my-beer energy. He had just wrapped up a successful campaign in Sicily and was furious that Hannibal was stealing his spotlight. He arrived at Scipio's camp with his own fresh legions, took one look at the situation, and immediately decided he was the man to end this. Scipio, from his stretcher, advised caution. "Look," he probably said, "that guy over there is the real deal. My legions are raw recruits. Yours are. Fine. But it's winter. Let's just wait him out. He'll run out of food." Longus heard, "Blah blah blah, I'm a big baby, don't go win all the glory." The 2 armies were now camped on opposite sides of the freezing, swollen Trebia River, a standoff. Hannibal, who was not just a military genius, but also a spectacular student of human stupidity, looked at this 2-headed consular command, and he smiled. He knew exactly which consul to talk to. Hannibal wasn't just planning a battle, he was writing a dark comedy, and the Romans were his punchline. His plan was simple, disgustingly simple. Find the most arrogant Roman in the camp. Check. His name is Longus. Find a really, really unpleasant place to fight. Convince said arrogant Roman to fight there, on an empty stomach, in the middle of a blizzard. First, the location. Hannibal's scouts found the perfect spot. A small, overlooked creek bed near the Trebia, overgrown with bushes and reeds. It was deep, it was hidden, and it was perfect for hiding a large group of men who really enjoyed stabbing people. That night, Hannibal called his kid brother, Mago Barca. Mago was the youngest of the lion's brood, and just as nasty in a fight as his older brothers. Hannibal gave him 1,000 elite infantry and 1,000 of his best cavalry. His orders were simple. Go hide in those bushes, don't make a sound, wait until the Romans are really having a bad time, and then, you know, go nuts. Mago and his 2,000 men snuck off into the freezing darkness and settled in for a night of miserable, shivering anticipation. The next phase of the plan was even more cynical. Dawn, December 21st. The weather is what meteorologists would call aggressively awful. It's sleeting, the wind is howling, and the Trebia River is a torrent of ice-cold misery. While the Romans were just waking up, Hannibal let his own men sleep in. He ordered them to have a big breakfast, rub oil into their skin to ward off the cold, sit by the fire, get comfortable. Then, he sent in the clowns. He ordered his Numidian cavalry, the best light horsemen in the world, and, more importantly, the most annoying to ride across the river and start making a racket right outside the Roman camp. They were to throw javelins, shout insults, and generally be the 3rd century BC equivalent of teenagers daring you to fight their dad. Inside the Roman camp, the alarm was sounded. Javelins clanged off the palisades, and Tiberius Sempronius Longus lost his mind. This was it, the glorious battle he'd been waiting for. Scipio, from his sickbed, was probably screaming, "Don't do it, it's a trap. He's literally luring you into a frozen river." But Longus knew better. He wasn't gonna let these Carthaginian hooligans disrespect his camp. He ordered the entire army, all 40,000 men, to form up. Now, no breakfast, no oil, no time to even put on your warm socks. "We are going to teach these punks a lesson," Longus bellowed. And the Roman army, cold, hungry, and very, very confused, began to march straight towards the river. If you've ever had to trudge through a waist-deep, semi-frozen river before you've had your morning coffee, you have some idea of what the Roman army was feeling. It was unpleasant. The Trebia River was swollen from the winter's sleet. The water was fast, it was numbing, and it came up to their chests. They had to hold their shields and weapons over their heads, completely breaking formation. By the time the first Roman Velite light infantry stumbled onto the far bank, he wasn't a soldier. He was a 40-pound block of human-shaped ice. And who was waiting for them on the other side? Hannibal, and his very warm, very well-fed army. As the Romans staggered out of the river, desperately trying to reform their maniples, they were so cold their hands could barely grip their weapons. Their shields were waterlogged and heavy. Their tunics were frozen solid. This wasn't an army, it was a mass hypothermia event with spears. Longus, probably feeling fantastic and not at all like a popsicle, ordered his men to deploy. To his credit, they actually did it. You have to respect the Roman legionary. Even when led by a certified moron, their discipline was terrifying. They formed their classic triplex aces, light infantry in the front, heavy infantry in the middle, and their cavalry, who were having an exceptionally bad day on the flanks. Across the field, Hannibal's army looked comfortable. His heavy Spanish, Gallic, and African infantry were in the center. His slingers and light troops were up front. And on his flanks, he put his trump card, his own cavalry, which outnumbered the Roman horsemen 2-1, plus his remaining 8-foot-tall war elephants, who were mostly there for the vibes and to scare the crap out of the Italian horses. The battle began. The Roman light troops, the velites, charged forward. They were immediately met by Hannibal's slingers and javelin men, and were mulched. They were too cold and disorganized to put up a real fight. Then, the main lines hit. Crash. This is where the story should have turned. This was 30,000 Roman heavy infantry. Even cold and hungry, they were the best in the world. And in the center, they started to win. The Roman legionaries, in a fit of pure disciplined rage, began pushing Hannibal's Gallic allies backward. They were carving a hole right through the Carthaginian center. Hannibal watched his center begin to buckle. His Gauls were folding. The Romans were about to punch through. He just waited. Because he knew what was coming. The battle in the center didn't matter. The real show was on the flanks, and the real show was still hiding in the bushes. While the Roman grunts in the middle were busy winning a battle they were about to lose, the situation on the flanks went from bad to, oh dear gods, why? Hannibal's 10,000-strong cavalry, a mix of high-speed Numidians and heavy-hitting Spanish and Gallic horsemen, didn't just hit the 4,000 Roman riders, they swallowed them. It wasn't a fight, it was a deletion. The Roman cavalry, who were already freezing and riding numb, demoralized horses, were hopelessly outnumbered and outclassed. And then, for good measure, Hannibal unleashed the elephants. The Roman allied cavalry, mostly Gauls who were probably wondering why they'd ever signed up for this, had never seen anything like them. The horses panicked, they broke, they ran. In less time than it takes to regret all your life choices, both Roman flanks were gone, vaporized. The cavalry was either dead, swimming back across the river, or already halfway to Greece. This is a problem. This is a problem because it left the Roman heavy infantry, who were still valiantly smashing Hannibal's center, completely, totally naked. Hannibal's cavalry didn't chase the routing Romans. That's a rookie mistake. No, they were professionals. They simply wheeled around, a perfect, thunderous crescent of 10,000 horsemen, and slammed into the back of the Roman legions. The Roman center, which had been so heroically advancing, ground to a halt. They were now being hit from the front by Hannibal's infantry and the back by Hannibal's cavalry. This, right here, is what we call a double envelopment, or in less polite terms, a really bad day. The Romans were now trapped, a 30,000-man sandwich of cold, tired, and very confused soldiers. Longus, who was probably still shouting, "We've got them on the run," finally realized something was wrong. The Roman legions, to their eternal credit, did not break. They formed a square. They were surrounded, but they were not finished. Hannibal looked at this new, stubborn Roman box. He looked at his men, who were beginning to get tired. He looked at the sky, which was still dumping icy rain on everyone. And then he looked over at that quiet, unassuming, reed-filled creek bed. He gave the signal. For Mago Barca and his 2,000 men, this was, without question, the worst morning of their lives. They had been lying in a frozen, muddy creek bed for about 6 hours. They were wet, They were cold, they had missed breakfast, and they had been forced to listen to a 40,000-man battle happening right next to them without being allowed to join in. When Hannibal's signal finally came, it wasn't just an order, it was permission. It was the get out of your cramped frozen ditch and go make this someone else's problem signal. With a collective roar that was equal parts battle cry and pure, shivering rage, 2,000 elite, angry, and extremely uncomfortable soldiers erupted from the creek bed directly into the back of the Roman army. For the Roman legionaries, this was the moment their brains just broke. They were already in a box. They were already fighting on two sides. They were cold, hungry, and surrounded. And now there were more of them? Coming out of the ground? This was the psychological straw that broke the legion's back. The legendary Roman discipline, which had held for hours against impossible odds, shattered. The Great Roman Square didn't just break, it dissolved. The Roman army ceased to exist. It was now just 40,000 terrified individuals, all simultaneously realizing that their boss had made a terrible mistake. Except for the front. In the most bizarre and darkly hilarious part of this whole disaster, the 10,000 Roman legionaries in the very center, the ones who had been pushing forward all day, just kept going. They punched straight through Hannibal's now very confused center, marched out the back of the battle, and just kept walking. They marched all the way to the nearby Roman town of Placentia. And, by some miracle, Consul Tiberius Sempronius Longus was with them. In the most task-failed successfully move in Roman history, Longus would later send a message back to the Senate claiming he had won the battle, because technically his men had broken the enemy line. He just, conveniently, neglected to mention the other 30,000 men. As for those other 30,000, they were not so lucky. The Great Roman Army was now a panicked mob, and their only escape route was the one they had taken that morning, back across the Trebia River. It was no longer a battle, it was a hunting party. Hannibal's cavalry, fresh and warm, went to work. The slaughter was immense. Men who weren't cut down by Numidian spears threw themselves into the icy water, only to be dragged under by the weight of their own armor. It was a total, unmitigated, and utterly predictable catastrophe. When the sun finally set on that miserable December day, the field was a horror show. But the real MVP of the battle? The weather. As Hannibal's men were busy rounding up the last of the drowning Romans, the sky really opened up. A storm of freezing rain and snow so violent that it forced the victorious Carthaginians to retreat. It was so cold that almost all of Hannibal's remaining war elephants, the stars of the flank attack, curled up and died from exposure. But while Hannibal lost his elephants, Rome had lost, well, everything else. Of the 40,000 men Longus had marched into that icy river, only about 10,000 made it to Placentia, the heroic center punchers, who had apparently forgotten to tell their friends they were leaving. The rest, dead, captured, or missing, which in this case meant became a permanent, frozen feature of the Trebia riverbed. Back at the Roman camp, the other consul, Scipio, the one who wasn't a total moron, had to organize the evacuation, smuggling his wounded self and the few remaining camp guards out in the dead of night, slipping away to Placentia while Hannibal was busy counting his prisoners. And Longus, the architect of this entire cluster disaster? He sent a dispatch to the Senate, and this dispatch is a masterpiece of political spin. It basically read, weather was bad, fought a battle, had to withdraw, but we totally won, send more laurels. The Roman Senate, desperate for good news, actually believed him. For a little while, they celebrated. Then the 10,000 survivors started talking, and the refugees started arriving. And they realized, wait, if we won, where are the other 30,000 men? Hannibal, for his part, was now the undisputed master of northern Italy. He had just destroyed 2/3 of a consular army, proven his tactical genius, and secured the loyalty of all the local Gauls who love a winner and hate Rome. The Battle of the Trebia wasn't just a defeat for Rome, it was a humiliation. It was a lesson, paid for in blood, that Hannibal Barca wasn't just some mountain climbing maniac. He was a strategic predator, and this was only his first major battle. He was just warming up.